Tale Never to be Told. Written by Dorothy M. Mitchell. Narrated by Viv Craggs. Chapter 1. Ruth Jennings was awakened by the sound of the blacksmith's hammer as it made contact with the anvil, each blow ringing like a bell. She gave a contented sigh, jumped out of bed and walked over to the bedroom window. There he was, Bill Jobson, doing what he always did. 6 days a week would find Bill either shoeing one of Jim Flint's horses or mending a wrought iron gate or two. Perhaps on a Sunday afternoon he could be found in his smithy drinking from his cider mug. Liked his cider, did old Bill. Mind you, he reckoned that St. Peter's Church was a must on a Sunday morning, his loud baritone voice shaking the rafters of the old church. Does me good to talk to him upstairs, puts me right for the week ahead, Jim tells anyone who cares to listen. Ruth had listened and smiled. She liked Bill Jobson. The man had doffed his cap to her more than once. She wasn't interested. He was a nice enough man, but the thought of him touching her made the girl shudder. Ruth watched as the blacksmith lifted the cartwheel he'd just been working on. The girl thought his arms resembled tree trunks, and his hands, well, they reminded her of the meat pasties her granny made. Would she miss this place when she and Reuben wed and moved into Magpie's Roost? The answer was yes, but as her new home when she married Reuben Ford was situated the other side of Bill Jobson's smithy, then she supposed it wouldn't be so bad. She would still hear the magpies' wheezing, chittering squawk early on a summer's morning, as they also were wakened by the blacksmith's hammering. The village of Appleby was in the North Riding of Yorkshire, about 1.5 miles from Hull. A pretty hamlet with a scattering of dwellings, 2 churches, 1 school, 3 sprawling farms and a doctor by the name of Samuel DeWitt. Ruth liked him. He'd been kind to her mum during the illness, accepting in kind a few eggs or an apple pie in exchange for treatment administered. Fortunately, Kate Jennings, Ruth's mother, seemed quite fit again and busy preparing for the big day. She was looking forward to the May wedding. Ruth, however, was a little concerned about her mum. She never said much, but the girl knew about the pain her mother tried to cover up. Her heart wasn't as strong as she made out. Ruth watched as Kate struggled to breathe on many occasions. "A nice time to get wed, lass," she'd said to Ruth. 18's a bit young, but Reuben Ford is a good lad and you won't be far away. Ruth was fond of her mum, and she would miss living in this cottage, but she comforted herself with the thought that her new home would only be 2 doors away, and she could pop in every day and make sure her mum and dad were all right. The 20th of May, 1903 arrived. Ruth awoke to a bright morning. She stretched and yawned, and as she lay looking up at the ceiling, a shadow came across her face. She was happy, of course she was. In a few hours she'd be Mrs. Ruth Ford, but this little cottage had been her home since she was a baby. Ruth hadn't been the only child to Kate and Eli Jennings. There had been another girl, but Ruby had died of consumption at the age of 3. This had almost broken her parents. Ruth could only vaguely remember the tragedy, her being about 5 at the time, but she remembered the wooden box and the crying. "Come on, Ruth, time to get up, love," her mother called up the stairs. Ruth pushed the rough blankets back and almost reluctantly left the comfy flock mattress. She was happy, however, that the feather pillows her mother had made for her would be going with her to Magpie's Roost, her new home. Ruth poured a jug of water into the wash bowl, removed her nightshirt and began to wash, being careful not to wet the strips of rag that her mother had laboriously tied into her thick, dark hair. Ruth didn't care for this much, feeling the bits of cloth tended to pinch her neck, but she had to admit that the ringlets were rather fetching, especially when tied up with pink ribbon. "Breakfast's on the table, lass. Martha laid you a nice brown egg this morning, special." Her dad was sitting at the old, well-scrubbed table. Ruth walked into the kitchen. She went over to her father and planted a kiss on his cheek. Eli gave his daughter that lovely, toothless smile. He gazed appraisingly at her and thought how much like her mum she'd become. The same dark hair, slim figure and dark blue eyes that set off that elfish face. Not so elfish now in her mother's case, but then Kate was older and the suffering was still evident in her careworn features. Ruth sat down and looked at the brown egg. She couldn't eat it. "Sorry, Mum, I can't. My tummy's too churned up," she said. Kate sighed. "You can't get married on an empty stomach, love. Now come on, try a bit of bread and butter." Her dad spoke up now with one of his choice comments. "Well, Ruth, I don't know. It looks like a nice day." "Well, I'll try. 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 I'll t
Sample complete. Ready to continue?